Okay, greetings everyone, and welcome to this session. This is our last topic for the course, and we're going to be talking about growth and development. Now, before we move forward, you guys just need to know the definitions of these two terms. Generally, growth means an increase in size, so essentially the baby or the child getting bigger. Whether that's height or weight or whatever other parameter we're talking about. And development means an increase in or a change in complexity, which is basically just maturing from a simple structure. So you can kind of think of what we've been studying this whole time as a form of development, or it is development actually, because we started off with a cell, and then that underwent a whole set of processes and ended up developing into a fetus that was born at the end of 9 months. Growth and development in itself, and when I say growth and development, I'm not talking about the course, I mean the two terms, growth and development, are actually related to the field of pediatrics, which is the branch of medicine that is dedicated to treating children from birth until adolescence. And usually this age depends on the standard practice in that specific country, and this can range anywhere from 14 to 16. Okay, so in pediatrics, growth and development is a subject that monitors the normal changes in children as they are getting older. Okay, so basically pediatricians monitor children as soon as they're born, so from the what we call the neonatal stage, which is as soon as they're born, and as they grow. Okay, because this is a period of a lot of changes as the child is getting older, so we need to make sure that the changes are happening normally. So the parameters used to measure these changes, if they are normal, reflect that the child is growing well, he or she has proper nutrition, they're growing in a good environment in terms of sanitation and care from the family, and being provided with all the things that he or she needs. If there are any discrepancies or changes in the parameters, then this is usually an indication of a problem that needs to be addressed. So, for example, if the baby is not gaining weight properly, then that means they're not getting enough nutrition, and each parameter will reflect a specific thing. The parameters of growth that are used to monitor the development of children and their growth are called anthropometric measurements. They are taken at every routine visit to a pediatric clinic. So basically, whenever the parents take their child to the pediatrician, there are certain measurements that he has to take, or he or she has to take at every visit to make sure that everything is going normally. So these include height, and these height usually reflects bone growth and hormonal balance, specifically the growth hormone. Okay, so if the growth hormone levels are normal, if the bones are growing normally, then the child's height will be increasing normally. The baby or the child's weight also has to be checked, and weight usually reflects nutrition. So obviously if they're eating normally, they will gain the proper amount of weight. If they're not being fed enough, they'll be underweight, and if they're being fed too much, they'll be overweight. The head circumference, which is basically how large the head is, this is only done during the first year, and what it does is that it reflects brain development. Now, if you guys remember, when we took the session about the fetal period, I told you that the central nervous system starts working around, I think it was 30 or 31 weeks or so. But the truth is, or the actual situation is that even after it starts working, it's still what you can consider like a primitive nervous system. It's still not completely developed and functioning at its full capacity. The nervous system actually completes its development and starts functioning properly after the first year of life. So basically during the first year of life, the brain is still developing. There's still things that need to kind of grow and get in their normal positions and so forth. Okay, so the way to make sure that the nervous system is developing properly is to make sure that the head circumference is normal. Because obviously, if the brain is, for example, maybe it has a lot of excess fluid, or there's something wrong with it, then that is usually reflected in the head circumference. Now, in order to make sure that these parameters are in fact progressing normally, what pediatricians do is they use something called growth charts. Now, growth charts are standardized charts that are used to test the normality of a measured parameter. What they do is they give you a range for each measurement in terms of what is considered normal or abnormal for the population at that age. Okay, so let's look at what a growth chart looks like. This is a growth chart. Okay, now this one is specifically for height. There's also one for weight. There's also one for head circumference. Now you can see in the vertical axis here, they've given you the length or height in centimeters, starting from 45 centimeters all the way up to 120. And then on the horizontal axis, they've got the age, from birth up until 1 year, 2 years, all the way up to 5. Okay, and then these small numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, those are the months. Okay, so 10 months, and then this is 1 year. Okay, now what I want you to notice are these curved lines in the middle here. Okay, now what these are called they are called centile lines. Okay, now in order to gather this information, what they had to do a long time ago is that they had to do studies on the population, okay, and find out what the normal range for the certain height at that certain age was supposed to be. Okay, now notice the colors of the lines. The one in the middle here is green, and if we follow it to the very end, this is called the 50th centile. This green line is the normal range, meaning that when you take the height at a certain age, they should be within this line. So let's just take an example. Let's say I have a child who's 1 year old. Okay, I'm going to go upwards until I intersect with the green line here. And then, and then I move across to the height. And then roughly a child at 1 year should be about 76 centimeters. Okay, that is in the normal range at the 50th centile. Okay, so that means that the majority of the population at 1 year age is usually 76 centimeters. All right, now notice the other lines are either above or below the 50th centile. 2 of them are in orange and 2 of them are in red. Okay, now the ones that are below the green line, if it's in orange, it's the 15th centile, and then below that is the 3rd. And if we go up, you've got the 85th centile here and the 97th centile here. Okay, now anything above or below the green line, which is the 15th centile, is considered abnormal. Okay, now the reason they are given in orange and red colors is that orange is kind of like an alert, okay, meaning that this is not normal, okay, so it's either below or above, but you should maybe wait until like the next visit to do another investigation to check that maybe it goes back to normal. All right, however, with the red line, that is a sign of alarm. Okay, so if it's at the 3rd centile, obviously he's too short. And if it's at the 97th, then obviously it's too high. And the reason that they are red means that it needs immediate investigation and immediate action to figure out what the problem is. So this idea applies to weight charts as well. And it applies to the head circumference chart as well. Now, depending on the age, we have certain tools that are used to measure each parameter, okay? With height or length, it depends on the age, Usually children that are less than 2 years, it's very difficult to get them to either stand up or keep them in one place. So what we do is we use something called an infantometer. And the infantometer has two boards, one that we stabilize on the head, and then the other one that we put next to the feet. And then wherever the boards are between, this is a ruler down here. Okay, so it will show you the length of the baby. Now this device is usually used in children that are under 2 years. Above 2 years or older than 2 years, you can use this device, which is called a standing scale. Now, the standing scale is actually very useful because what it does is it measures the weight and the height at the same time. Now, you see this metal piece here? This can move up and down. So you just get the child to stand on the scale, and then you move this metal piece until it's perpendicular with the head, and then this will show you the height, and then at the same time you can measure the weight. This is called an infant scale, and again, this is used for children under 2 years of age that cannot stand up, or if you're finding it difficult to keep them in one place. And again, you just put them on the scale, and the dial will show you how much they weigh. Oh, sorry, my bad. Alright. To measure head circumference is very easy. You just use a standard measuring tape, so there's no special device that's used. Okay, and what you do is you put the tape on the most prominent part of the forehead above the eyebrows, and then you pass it all the way back to the most prominent part of the head back here. Okay, and then this will show you what the head circumference is. And like I said, head circumference is important for monitoring brain development. Okay, so that is in relation to growth. Remember that each parameter is used to reflect a specific thing. You've got 3 parameters, which are height, weight, and nutrition. For development, remember development was a change in the structure. Okay, so an increase in complexity of the baby or the organism. And this comprises the changes that are happening in the child as he or she learns to adapt to the environment. Okay, so basically how the child interacts with the surrounding environment. And we're going to see how that happens in a minute. Development in itself is an indicator of nervous system maturity. So growth gave you a few parameters, and each parameter reflected something. But development as a whole is usually an indication of development or changes or maturation of the nervous system. All right. Now, the areas of development are indicators that are tested to reflect the development, and they are usually grouped into 4 categories. So basically, in order for me to decide whether or not this child is developing normally, I have 4 things or 4 areas that I need to test. Okay? The first area is something called the gross motor area, and this basically refers to body movements. So basically, how is the child moving his or her limbs and body muscles. All right. The second area is fine motor and vision, which is basically anything that involves using their hands and their eyes. The fourth area is testing their hearing, which is basically can they hear normally or not, and testing their speech in terms of how they are talking at a certain age. And the fourth region, or the fourth area, is their social development, which is basically how they interact with the people around them. Okay? Now, with development, there is a certain concept called milestones, so let's just look into that. Milestones are checkpoints that are found along the developmental process. Basically, it is a goal of development that should be achieved by a specific age. Okay, so if we take an example, let's say the gross motor development, which we said was their body movements and things involving their limbs. Okay, so we say that the milestone is, for example, walking. Okay, walking involves the muscles of the back. They should be supporting the body weight. It involves the muscles of the legs, obviously, so that they can get up and walk. So walking should be achieved usually by 12 months, and they give it a range up to 18 months. Okay? If this checkpoint or if this goal of development is not reached by that specific age, this is referred to as developmental delay. So let's say you have a child that's 18 months and they still haven't learned to walk, or they're only just crawling, or there's something that they haven't reached. This usually indicates that there is some problem with the development of the nervous system, so it's delayed. It's not progressing at the rate that it should be. And in some situations, a milestone is achieved, but then it is lost due to illness. So they had it, but then they got sick, and then they lost it. And an example of this would be if a child started walking at 12 months, and then let's say they got meningitis, and that affected their nervous system so much that they got paralyzed, and now they can't walk. Okay, so this is called developmental regression. So they were already at the milestone, but they lost it, and then they moved backwards. Okay, so this chart indicates, or is just an example of what milestones look like. I don't need you guys to memorize these now, okay? But the idea is that at every age, there are certain things that the child or the infant should be able to do. So, for example, up until 6 months, okay, he should be able to turn his head. They usually babble certain sounds, okay, or they respond to certain sounds. They can play or socially with people, things like peekaboo, okay, and then in 12 months of age, you know, things are going to progress. Okay, for example, they're going to start walking and start crawling and walking. So there are certain things that are achieved at every age, and usually these are monitored up until 4 and 5 years of age. Okay, so let's just take some examples of areas of development. So like we said, they're grouped into 4 categories. Okay, and the first one was gross motor. Like I said, this involves development related to the large muscles of the body that are responsible for any type of body movement. So the things we monitor or the milestones for gross motor development are rolling over on the bed. So usually a baby, when they're born, they just lie on their back, and then as they start getting older, they have the ability to just kind of flip over. And then after that, they can lift their head, which usually indicates that their neck muscles are getting stronger. When they can sit up, this is an indication that their back muscles are getting stronger. And then they crawl, and eventually they walk and run and drive their parents crazy. With fine motor and vision, this is monitoring the delicate movements of the hand, and this is because the hand is more of an advanced area of the central nervous system. And the other thing to keep in mind is being able to hold something properly depends on being able to see it. So that's why they usually put fine motor and vision together. And the progress of fine movement goes from something called a palmar grasp. And if you notice when a baby is really young and then you give them something, they usually just kind of grab it with their entire hand. Okay? So it's just a random grab of something using all of their fingers. Okay? The next stage is they progress to something called a hand transfer, which means if they are holding something in their right hand, they can switch it to their left hand. And then the final stage is called the pincer grasp, which is the ability to hold an object between the index finger and the thumb. So it basically means that at the initial stages of development, they start off with a palmar grasp, and then once the CNS develops even more, they progress to hand transfer, and then finally, when the full development has been achieved, they use a pincer grasp. Now, obviously, if there's something wrong with their vision, they won't even reach this stage. Okay, they won't even be able to have the palmar grasp because they can't see what they're doing. So if a child doesn't achieve the palmar grasp, then that's usually a reason to check their vision. And if their vision is normal, then they should check the area of the CNS that controls the hand, or focus on checking the hand muscles. With hearing and speech, these two are considered together because hearing words is how children learn them. And if you guys notice, usually children pick up the words that they hear a lot in the house. Okay, so that's why these two are grouped together. So if a child doesn't start speaking at the normal time or at the normal age, or they have delayed speech, this may reflect impaired hearing. All right. The normal progress of this area is that a child is expected to say mama by at least age 12, and then at least 2 other words by 18 months. Okay. Usually if they pick up words faster, that's not a concern for, that's not a reason for concern per se, unless it's associated with something else. But the problem becomes when they're not speaking at the age that they should be. Again, like I said, that's either a problem with their hearing, or it might just simply be that the environment that they're in does not promote speaking, in the sense that nobody speaks to them a lot. They don't hear a lot of words around them, and that can happen, by the way. So again, it's something that has to be investigated if it does happen. Social development is usually relevant at older ages, so usually from age 3 and 4 onwards. This is also important when the child starts going to school and interacting with other people. But social development is usually tested by whether or not the baby smiles, if he or she knows who the family members are. So usually the doctor notices if, for example, the child is comfortable with cousins or aunts, whoever it is that comes along to the visit as well. Okay, and something called stranger anxiety, which means that they have the ability to recognize who is not in their immediate circle. Okay, so for example, the mother comes in, she's carrying her baby, and then their dad is coming in with them, so the baby is calm. But then let's say the nurse tries to come and take him. He recognizes that this is a stranger, this is someone they don't know, and then they start getting agitated and start crying. So this is an indication of social development. Okay, so in summary, monitoring growth and developmental milestones is an essential part of pediatric practice. And like I said, you guys are going to get this in a lot more detail when you go on to 5th year. So this was just an introduction to the topic. And any abnormalities in any area of growth or development are usually a major cause of concern, can be due to a variety of reasons, and usually require some form of investigation to figure out what the problem is and try to fix it. And that's all I have for you for this course. I realize I should have put a positive quote, as I always do, but this one seemed more appropriate. So thank you so much for joining me for this entire course. I hope it was helpful and useful for you. I hope I managed to make the concepts clear for you to understand. And as always, I will be available for questions if you guys need any extra help. And I guess I'll be seeing you when uni starts again. So thank you for everything, and I will see you guys soon.